Welcome to this Conversations on Groong episode. Before we get going, we'd like to thank our listeners. We really appreciate your thoughtful comments on our YouTube video pages. So keep them coming, keep the dialogue channels open. That's what we thrive on. Today, we're talking about next month's 2024 parliamentary elections in Georgia. We have with us Dr. Darchiashvili, a scholar with expertise in international relations and also a former member of parliament in Georgia. Greetings, David. Welcome back to the show.
Gamarjoba.
Hello.
And welcome back.
Good morning or good evening, or whatever is the time, depending on time zone.
That's right.
I'm glad to be with you.
Thank you. So Georgia is holding parliamentary elections on October 26, and the internal political rhetoric is heating up. We know that there's a big rift between the current Georgian Dream ruling party and the West to the point where the EU has paused Georgia's EU candidacy and has imposed a number of sanctions against the ruling party leadership after the recent law on transparency of foreign influence, which the West calls the foreign agent law or sometimes even Putin's law, and also some other legislative changes that were introduced in the country. So amidst high polling numbers, Georgian Dream has doubled down on its political and geopolitical positions and officials. Just yesterday, they announced Bidzina Ivanishvili as their party's lead candidate, current Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze as their number 2, and former Prime Minister Irakli Garibashvili as their number 3. Georgia has opted out of some anti-Russian measures throughout the war in Ukraine, causing issues and contention in relations between Georgia and Ukraine. Anyway, let's start with a fiery statement that was published on the official Georgian Dream Facebook page on August 19, which stated that if Georgian Dream achieves constitutional majority, then they will initiate a legal process as a result of which Saakashvili's UNM, United National Movement, and its satellites would be declared unconstitutional.
By the way, we should mention that I believe at one point our guest was a member of the UNM, or at least was an MP on behalf of UNM. So I don't know if you still are, and you can talk about them officially, but I thought it was worth mentioning.
So, David, what does constitutional majority mean? What percentage of the vote does Georgian Dream need to achieve this, and can they achieve this?
Mm-hmm. Well, on Hovik's remark, let me briefly answer that I was a member until the end of the 2016. Then I moved with part of the party into another sort of political entity, but I left it also, and so remain just a member of the academic community. But current turmoil and rather dramatic developments in Georgia tell me that if opposition needs me, I just ready to serve as a ordinary citizen to them, be an observer during elections or whatever. Because I think Georgia, since independence, it remained on the crossroad of civilizations and foreign policy orientations, but currently it's really very dramatic because unexpectedly Georgia received an offer to join the European Union, and the government of Georgia basically refuses to it. Yes, formally it says that, well, one day we will join, but refusing to follow the requests for such a term and refusing to fulfill the homework, to do the homework Georgia is obliged to do in order to qualify for the European Union membership. It becomes very clear that the government does not want it. And so that makes many in Georgia believe that it's a turn towards pro-Russian policy orientation, which Georgia always hesitated to do. It was either clearly pro-Western, like in Saakashvili's times. It's another story whether Saakashvili was doing everything right or not, but his ideological and strategic orientation was clear. Other governments, I mean, they either balanced between East and West because we are located together with Armenia in very turbulent region, or again were more pro-Western than pro anything else. But suddenly that's the first time the Georgian government makes steps which can hardly be interpreted as anything but pro-Russian. Their, concrete steps, the laws they adopted, Asbed mentioned, all tells that it's just only Russia is pleased with such developments.
We would definitely like to explore this more because politics in Georgia, as in Armenia, is polarized, and we sometimes have a debate which one is more polarized, and I think there's a competition about that one too. Why does the Georgian Dream seek to outlaw UNM? And at the same time, can we really say actually that Georgian Dream is pro-Russian? Because as far as I know, this government still does not have official relations with Russia. So that line in terms of foreign relations is continuing. Is there any indication that that would change as well?
Pro-Russian forces in Georgia try to portray themselves not as openly pro-Russian, although we have such groups which are clearly sort of waving Stalin's portraits or red flags, but these are just marginal minority groups. But more serious players, while they do Russian business, they try to portray it as a pro-Georgianness. But I believe that if you isolate yourself, if the country isolates itself from the democratic community of nations, then only authoritarian part of the world benefits from it. And first and foremost, it's Russia. And Russia's demand is not just to openly declare the readiness to join Commonwealth for Independent States or Eurasian Union. They just want that you cut your ties with the West, that you stop being a strategic partner with the European Union, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and create troubles in relations with the United States. If you do that, then that's for the time being, it's enough for Russia. And if you especially then try to spoil your relations with Ukraine, even better for Russia. Then you also can be kind of a clandestine bridge or channel of helping Russia avoid international sanctions. Well, even better for Russia. That's what Georgian Dream was doing steadily.
Well, I mean, definitely, I would not call myself an expert in Georgia, but I believe anyone from the other side that I've talked to, they're saying that, when you said that Georgia is trying to ruin its relations with Ukraine, I think the other side would respond by saying that Georgia is not trying to open a second front against Russia. Is it a good idea, in your opinion, to openly side with Ukraine in this war? And do you think that Georgia has chances to survive? Or is that a good way of phrasing it? I'm just wondering because we're in the same boat in a different way, where we're trying to Armenia, has to be very sensitive in terms of Turkish and Azerbaijani military threats. So where does realpolitik come in here? Or is there room for that at all?
Well, of course, Georgia is a small and weak country. Hardly Georgia can afford itself a new crisis with military repercussions with Russia. But no one, especially international community, was expecting it from Georgia. And neither sober-minded Ukrainians would demand it. What the international community, together with the Ukrainians, expected, just a sympathy expressed and some kind of moral and diplomatic support. I think that Moldovans are quite smart in doing that. Of course, it also irritates Russia, but I belong to these people which, of course, appreciate the real political demands in international relations, but also believe that these relations cannot be completely stripped of some moral ground. So you have to make a principal choice. So what your country and your government stands for, what kind of values and norms it adheres, whether it supports international law or not, whether it stands for human rights, rule of law, democracy or not. So this choice, I think, is still unavoidable. It also internal policy matter, but it has also implications for foreign policy orientation. And if you are not clear in this, if you hesitate or kind of bewilder in these principal moral matters, then of course you ruin your, you somehow betray the club you want to join. No, you do not qualify anymore to be a candidate for the club you somehow declaratively wished to join. So it's all about it. And instead of that, what we see that Georgian governmental representatives talk about global party of war. They are never absolutely clear whom they imply, whom they mean under this, but it becomes through the discourse analysis, it becomes apparent that they are blaming the West for all troubles which are developing in the former Soviet Union. So it then becomes clear that so we are back in the Soviet times when the West was blamed in every scene in the world affairs. So that's what we are witnessing.
The statement from Georgian Dream was rather divisive. Trying to understand how the Georgian electorate responds to things like this. Do voters demand such strong statements ahead of their elections? What has been the reaction of the people in Georgia to such a statement?
Asbed, probably in 2012, there was a substantive part of the Georgian society which expected some kind of prosecuting procedures against the former government, which means UNM, the Saakashvili's government. But 12 years passed. And what we witnessed and what also made Georgian society to change its mind, that it's clear that those who are critical to current government, they are being demonized. But others who decided to join the government, despite all accusations and all particular cases against them, they are welcomed. Like former law enforcement people, former judges, if they are serving a new government, they are just absolutely immune, untouchable, and the best supporters of the government. So it's not about the finding the truth. So what kind of crimes, if ever, were committed under the Saakashvili's government? It's just about political sympathy, antipathy. So if you support Ivanishvili, then you can be whatever crimes you committed in the past, you are just absolutely cleaned. But if you dare to be critical of current politics, then you are still demonized. And what this April speech of Ivanishvili, this April, made clear that it's not only about UNM as such, but it's about the whole opposition. The whole opposition, which consists of quite a few parties.
Yes.
Some of them had some relations with the previous government. Others were also in the opposition to Saakashvili's government. NGOs and media outlets, they all are portrayed as a collective national, united national movement, as a collective body of Saakashvili. And it means that the current crusade against opponents of Zina Ivanishvili, it's kind of a attempt to eradicate the political opposition in the country.
Boy, that sounds familiar to us, doesn't it?
Yes, yes, definitely. So I wanted to actually talk a little bit more about that because we're looking at recent results. I would say this is from last month, the GORBI polls. Maybe there are new ones out there, but according to, I believe this was from August, the GORBI poll that we looked at showed that support for Georgian Dream is at 59.3%, while UNM itself is only at 13.1%. We understand that there are other opposition parties, so if we add them all theoretically together, we might get 40% altogether for all opposition parties. First of all, can we trust these poll numbers? And if so, and if you previously said that Georgians want to join the EU, Georgians want to support the foreign policy of the former government of the opposition, essentially, why is their support so low, comparatively speaking? Because I would expect, 90% to be pro-opposition.
GORBI as an organization is widely believed as being a part of the Georgian Dream sort of
Okay.
kitchen. And, even if there is not enough evidence to prove this, that the GORBI simply writes an artificial figures, one can question its results due to the fact that 80%, according to every poll, including GORBI, are in support of joining the EU immediately. And how then it comes that almost 60% of the overall Georgian population is supportive of Georgian Dream, because the certain steps of Georgian Dream were exactly against the materialization of this demand of the Georgian population. So then we can conclude that either Georgian population is sort of not quite intelligent, not to see who spoiled relations with the European Union, or the figures are incorrect.
Well, I have to say there's a lot of parallel between Armenia here as well, because, for instance, there was a recent poll in Armenia that said that do you want to join the EU, and I think, or Europe, and 55% said yes, which is a rather shockingly high number for Armenia. But when they phrase it in the way that if leaving the Eurasian Economic Union is a precondition for that, do you want to secede from the EAEU before you join the EU? That number was much less, even though it was still like shockingly high in my opinion. Do you believe that this dream of joining the EU for Georgians and for Armenians, and I don't mean to insult anyone, but it simply means like essentially being able to travel to EU to work there, having this dream that is being advertised to them without the actual responsibilities and the actual potential sort of side effects of being a member of the EU. At least that's what I thought when I read the polls in Armenia.
Georgians, unlike Armenians, were never the members of the Eurasian Union. And never ever any poll showed that Georgians wanted to, or mass of Georgians wanted to join this Russian-led economic alliance or whatever. And so Georgians can hardly be asked the question whether you would decide to ruin or risk your relations with Russia if you join the European Union. So it's a different situation. What we faced year after year is ever increasing desire of Georgians to be within the European community of nations. And currently this chance emerged. We all can receive the information that the European Union politicians, diplomats, whatever, they put clear conditions what should be done to make it happen. And that is the Georgian government which creates obstacles. So that's the situation here. It's, I think, is very clear, and hardly those who always wanted to be European, they would support the Georgian dream, especially now, especially since 2022, 2023, 2024, especially during these 3 years when the Georgian dream started making steps against the European Union. So, yes, maybe some old people who still find it difficult to navigate through these complex international affairs, interpretations, discourses might be lost, but not youngsters especially. And if you recall the demonstrations in the capital of Tbilisi, it was unprecedented number of people protesting against the decision of Georgian Dream. So all this tells that 59%, it's impossible to be reality, especially if you take into account the numbers received by the ruling party back in 2020, 2021. It was never above 40 something percent. And now suddenly 59,
Yeah.
it's impossible. But leaving
But
behind.
even 40% is, in my opinion, significant. I mean, it's not like,
as I know from other polls and from other surveys, Edison Research, which is the American institution, and some others, the numbers of supporters are of Georgian Dream are about 30%, 30.
Okay.
That's the maximum they have now. So probably that's the number Saakashvili had at the end of his rule. For various reasons, including this European affair, people are, I mean, two-thirds and more of the population are fed up with the current government, which rules 12 years already. And so that's the situation. So if the elections are free and fair, more or less, as it is common in the Caucasus, then of course the Georgian Dream faces the serious trouble. But my impression is that they are getting ready to follow the scenario of Lukashenko or Maduro and manipulate elections as much as possible.
We can talk more about this because I do want to understand where we're going as we head into these elections. But just last week, MPs from Germany traveled to Georgia to support the opposition. And actually, while in Georgia, they gave the Georgian Dream a stern warning that the foreign agent law, or the, if you prefer, the Russian law, must be abolished, or EU membership will be blocked. Why has this specific issue have become a battleground between the West and Georgia? Because I think it clearly has. We know that many Western countries have similar laws against foreign agents or foreign interference. And just the act of foreign government members coming to Georgia to give this warning to the Georgian government seems like foreign interference to me. Obviously, as a layperson, as someone watching from the side, do you think that it was a good move to actually bring in German MPs to Georgia to give this warning to the Georgian government? I mean, I understand that this issue is politicized, but what is your opinion on this in general?
For instance, this American freedom of how it's called, foreign agent.
Foreign Agent Registration Act, the
Yes,
FARA.
yes, FARA. FARA. Reading it and comparing with Georgian or Russian equivalents, it became clear that, first of all, those entities who act in the United States and which are foreign will be registered as foreign agents if they act under the guidance of foreign principle and if it is proved in the court. In Georgian case, nothing like that is said. It's just if you receive money from abroad, this money can be from the OSCE, from the Council of Europe, from any non-governmental entity like Soros Foundation or whatever, without any court hearings or anything, you just have to be registered as an entity under the foreign influence, playing at hand of the foreign whatever forces. And so it is, I think, serious difference. Another is civilization. Also, when the United States adopted this law, it was aimed at Nazi Germany interference into American politics and then Soviet interference. What Georgians do together with Russians now, they are targeting Western democracies. So it's a civilizational choice. That's what I mentioned from the very beginning, that we are in the midst of the civilizational fight. So what world and what value system you want to belong? So you follow like Putin Surkov's idea of sovereign democracy and blame the West in all scenes, in decadence and so on, and in just challenging that men should be a man and the women should be a women, or you just follow the ideas of enlightenment, modernism, modernity, which West developed and not without controversies and troubles, but still somehow follows this path. So you make a choice. So whom you are against. And Georgian government made this law to work against the European civilization, including Americans, which I think that by and large still belong to the European civilization, and decide to be on the side of authoritarian, clannish, feudal mentality, having supporters of such a mentality, such value systems, which in modern times can be nothing but mafia. And so that's what we joined, the club of mafia. This law is used in support of mafia kind rules, restoration of feudal relations against whatever imperfect but still modernization in Western style.
We're talking about Georgia between the West and Russia, mostly. Is Turkey a player in Georgian politics?
And actually, for that matter, Asbed, speaking of civilizational choices, Iran is not too distant a neighbor. And China is actually involved very much in Georgia by building a huge port on the Black Sea. So how does Georgia balance, essentially? I think if I can expand Asbed's question, how do we balance reality and coming back to my previous statement, which is like sort of real political concerns, whether it's Chinese interests, whether it's Iranian interests, whether it's Turkish interests, for at least Georgia, at least for Armenia, it hasn't become such a huge deal yet.
In case of Georgia, the Russia is the most aggressive part of this more or less anti-Western world. BRICS.
So do you see Chinese, for instance, the Chinese port as a net positive for Georgia?
No, I don't see it as a positive because Chinese at least are not interested in promotion of democracy in Georgia. For me, it's not so much choice for territorial integrity, although that is also a serious issue, but the choice for the democracy and human rights protection in Georgia. Because I don't believe that we can restore territorial integrity without being attractive due to really market economy, free economy, and human rights. It's a long way, but much more solid and stable way for the decision of geopolitical or local territorial disputes. And Chinese are not interested in this. It's not a value for them, unfortunately. That's how I see it. As to Turks, Turkey is somehow in between. I still think that Turkey can be influenced by the international law because by and large Turkey is interested in maintaining good relations with the Western Hemisphere, but sometimes some not very pleasant moves can also be expected, as from Turkey, so from Iran, but first and foremost, Georgia is faced by Russia. And Russia's interference in Georgian internal politics is especially troublesome for our country. I know that it's slightly different in the case of Armenia, but by and large, if we jointly stand for these fundamental values linking us with the European civilization, then it makes a solid ground for mutual understanding and cooperation. Because I believe that such small and weak countries, unfortunately, as Georgia and Armenia, can hardly sustain themselves as good places for living, for societal development, if they are not seriously protected under the international law, under some international institutional, political context, and only forces who are standing for this context. These are the forces presented by, again, starting from the mildest OSCE and up to EU and NATO. So without good relations with them, we just will stay at mercy of the shadows of the past, of the historical empires.
Understood. We have many questions, but so little time. But I do want to drill down on Georgia's relations with Turkey. You just said that you believe in general Turkey is still considered, for you at least, in the Western sphere of influence or as a Western actor. It's funny that most pro-EU Armenians are saying that Turkey is in cahoots with Russia. So because of the different policies that and our only hope is if Georgia becomes part of the EU, then Armenia would be, as an attachment to that, it would be like a little wedge in the Caucasus. But most Armenians, I think, would never see Turkey as a pro-Western sort of power nowadays, especially. But how would you assess the role of Turkey in Georgian politics? Are there red lines for Turkey when Georgia makes statements or when Georgia orients its policy that Georgian leaders would avoid? And how strong is Turkish influence in Georgian politics?
Talking about Turkey, I tried to be cautiously critical in terms of saying that from the one hand, Turkey is interested to be a partner of the Western institutions and the world, and membership in NATO shows it. On the other hand, some unexpected troubles can be expected from Turkey. So Turkey is somehow a hybrid player in this respect. But this hybridity has more negative repercussions in relations with Armenia, possibly, than in relations with Georgia. And Turkey, from the one hand, sometimes try to partner with Russia in order to balance possible Western influence in the Black Sea region, because Turkey has its own regional ambitions. But on the other hand, envies Russia, and recently Erdogan made a statement that Crimea should be part of Ukraine. So again, relations are complex between Turkey and Russia. But in case of Armenia, yes, that has a peculiar problems. But to return to Georgia, I don't see serious involvement of Turkey in internal politics of Georgia. Turkey remains more economic player than political player, but of course Turkey has a serious potential to play a political role also. But until now, it somehow tried to keep the low profile in politics, in Georgian politics. How it will develop in future, I don't know. Difficult to predict. I think that Turkey can play as positive so negative role in Georgian politics. Let's leave it on that level.
Understood.
So there are a lot of predictions of a possibility that the next government of Georgia may not be decided at the polling stations, because there's so much polarization during this season that no matter what the outcome, people could just hit the street. Do you have any predictions on this? What are the main scenarios that you see unfolding?
My impression is that Ivanishvili, whatever intensive political moves he makes, especially yesterday, he presented the new party list of his Georgian Dream for these elections, or first 20 candidates who they will be. So he tries to attract famous sportsmen,
Olympians and everything.
Yes, hardly that is very impressive for the critical mass of the population, especially in the city. Politics is by and large decided in capitals. More than 30% of Georgians live in Tbilisi, and Same situation is in Armenia also, and I think whoever wins the capital, he is a winner. So in Tbilisi especially, the rate of Georgian Dream is very low. So what he tries to compensate it with, that is the reliance or on money, on sort of attracting people by paying them, sort of threatening those hundreds of thousands of Georgians who are on the social assistance, and then scaring them that the social assistance would be withdrawn. But even that is not enough. So he very much relies on law enforcement, formal institutions like police and security, but also informal groups which have been created through years. Some kind of groups, physically fit men who are following the political leaders for the Georgian Dream, who are attacking opposition members, and these attacks are ongoing issue in Georgia. Started, I mean, it was happening even before, years before, but now after this mass protests in the streets, it became quite frequent. Then at night, especially at the vicinity of the apartments, homes of these opposition people, they are suddenly attacked by unidentified people. These cases are never properly investigated, and we know that such groups exist. So I think Ivanishvili puts his hope on such activities of intimidation, scaring, and somehow putting down the opposition members.
Do you expect that the opposition will accept the results of
No,
whatever
no,
results
I
of the
don't
elections?
expect. No, I think that there will be exit polls, there will be other surveys before the elections, and if the final results of the elections will be completely sort of diverting to another direction and not matching with these sociological calculations, there will be a big protest movement in Georgia. And then things will go somehow in Venezuelan way, and then what will be the end result, nobody knows.
Okay, well, to end this podcast, I want to turn our attention a little bit to Armenia and Georgia. In the negotiations between Armenia and Azerbaijan, Azerbaijan is demanding that Armenia change its constitution, theoretically to eliminate territorial demands by Armenia on Azerbaijan. But of course, Armenia says that its constitution has no territorial demands, yet Azerbaijan's constitution has 45 to 46,000 square kilometers of demands from both Armenia and Georgia. Pashinyan also says that he's not raising these issues in the negotiations in order not to block the negotiations. How is Georgia dealing with Azerbaijani territorial claims, border delimitation issues, and are there negotiations to remove such claims?
No, border delimitation is not finalized with neither Azerbaijan nor between Georgia and Armenia. It was always a debatable issue because of certain holy places. It's all about these places which are by Georgians considered as belonging to Georgian cultural heritage. Azerbaijan is saying that no, it's the Azeri cultural heritage. Then there are much less hot, but still debates between, and I think we talked about it during the previous meeting we had between Armenian church and Georgian church. So that is all complicated. I hope that if democracy prevails in all our South Caucasus countries, these issues will be automatically solved one way or another. No one in the European Union between Germans and French people debates which church belonged to what culture. It's ridiculous for the many European nations. Although if you go to the east, if you reach, I don't know, Poland, for instance, Slovakia, Hungary, then these troubles seem still alive. but still, I mean, somehow mitigated, controlled through the institutions. Here we still face these troubles, but I never heard that Azerbaijani constitution demands 45,000 square kilometers from neighbors. Maybe some historians, but not the constitution. So.
Because Azerbaijan essentially stated that it is the successor of the first Azerbaijani Republic, and the first Azerbaijani Republic did have such claims. I think Pashinyan was trying to make the point that today's Azerbaijan has not relinquished those claims from the first republic. So
I don't
in
know.
theory,
On the other hand, Hovik, Azerbaijan, as much as Georgia and also Armenia, they consider themselves to be the heirs of the Soviet republics. And it means that they agree with the Soviet borders,
yeah.
which are by themselves not clear, but in tens of square kilometers, not in thousands.
Right. Of course, Azerbaijan has not signed up to honoring the Alma-Ata Declaration. And in any case, the declaration doesn't come with any delimited borders anyway.
I think that obviously the outcome of the war in 2020 plays a major role here. But I think that at least intellectually, Azerbaijan is trying to make this argument that this concept of Western Azerbaijan, even Yerevan itself, is ancient Azerbaijani land. That's what
let me agree that these are very risky statements. And of course, these statements can be interpreted in different ways, and they can, of course, fuel emotions. And that's why I'm saying that if we stay within the, international system of security arrangements within the realm of the Helsinki Final Act, OSCE, staying close to the European Union and so on, we can be better guaranteed than just remaining on our own, facing just old imperial dreams coming back.
Yeah, it depends, I guess, how far back in history you go. This region was always in one empire or another. But I think if there's anything that I would agree with you, that the more independent policy these states pursue, the better would be for both Armenians and Georgians. Let me ask you a very provocative question, if you don't mind. If Russia tomorrow came and said, you know what, we would support some kind of a union if Abkhazia and South Ossetia decided to reunify with Georgia, we would support it, and essentially try to push that scenario. Do you think that many Georgians would then take Russia's side? Is the issue with Russia the open wound of the 2008 war, or is there more to between Georgia and Russia in terms of historic grievances?
I don't think that many Georgians or majority of Georgians would believe that Russians can do it, because the experience of 200-something years of relations with Russia never showed ever the case that Russia cared about Georgian political autonomy, not to say independence, territorial integrity, and so on. Quite contrary was always the case. That's one thing. Another thing is that, I think it was Cicero, the Roman political thinker, who once said that it does not matter if the empire, the state is large, if the citizens of the states are slaves. So I don't want to be united under the big concentration camp. I want independence, territorial integrity, and so on, for the freedom of citizens, respect of individual rights, including Abkhazians everywhere, and unification under Kremlin as it stands currently, what ideas Kremlin projects. It will be just Abkhazization of Georgia, not just Georgianization of Abkhazia. If you understand what I mean. So it's just making Georgia a unified governorship of Russia.
No, I think we're good. I just want to say that I really appreciate this frank discussion. I tried to throw some curveballs at you, but I think you managed very well. Thank you.
All right. Let's leave it there on that positive note then. Thank you,
Yeah.
Dr. Darchiashvili, for joining us. We look forward to hopefully some sort of peaceful elections and outcome.
Well, I hope very much. Hope. There are risks, but still, let's hope for better. Thank you. I enjoyed very much talking with you.
We will talk to you soon again.
Definitely, we would love to have you back.
Bye.
That's our show today. This episode was recorded on September 11, 2024. We've been talking with Dr. David Darchiashvili, who is a former MP of the Georgian parliament from the United National Movement Party from 2008 to 2016. Currently, he's not affiliated with any political parties and concentrates on his research and teaching at Ilia State University in Tbilisi with expertise in international relations. For more on Dr. Darchiashvili, check out his page through our show notes at podcasts.groong.org. Please remember two requests from us, Hovik and I, to you, our listeners. We want to see your thoughts and comments under our YouTube videos. Our channel is at youtube.com/Groong. Second, we would be delighted if you'd become a sustaining supporter of our podcasts. Go to podcasts.groong.org/donate and sign up to give monthly through one of our tiers we have there. You could become a Surge supporter or a Lahmacun luminary or a Harisa humanitarian. We thank you in advance. I'm Asbed Bedrossian.
And this is Hovik Manucharyan.
Please follow us on social media and follow us everywhere you get your Armenian news. The links are in the show notes. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.